Welcome to 8.2, the High and Late Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, popes and the church spread their influence across Europe. European rulers, too, grew more powerful. However, this increase in power often resulted in conflict. Rulers of the Holy Roman Empire, which extended from Germany to Italy, often confronted the Pope over the appointment of church officials. Pope Gregory VII wanted the church to be free from lay or non-church control. To do this, he banned lay investiture, in which the emperor rather than the pope would name and install bishops. However, the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV said that bishops held royal lands under his control, so he had the right to appoint them. In 1076, the Pope excommunicated him and threatened to crown a new emperor. Henry was forced to humble himself to the Pope as a sinner, and Gregory forgave him. Later, Henry led an army to Rome, and sending Gregory into exile. 50 years later, the Concordat of Worms, I should say that in the German style, Worms, was accepted, giving the Pope sole power to invest bishops with religious authority, and the emperors the right to invest them with lands. Power struggles over land also occurred during the 1100s and the 1200s. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I, also called Frederick Barbarossa, or the Redbeard, fought but failed to capture wealthy northern Italian cities. Instead, he arranged for his son to marry the heiress of Sicily and southern Italy, expanding his control there. His grandson, Frederick II, also sought but failed to control northern Italy. Ultimately, the Holy Roman Empire broke up into separate feudal states, while southern Italy went through centuries of chaos. By the 1200s, the Church reached its peak of power. In 1198, Pope Innocent III took office and claimed supremacy over all other rulers. He excommunicated the English and French kings and placed their kingdoms under interdict, which means barring people from religious sacraments. He also launched a holy war against heretics in southern France, killing tens of thousands. After Innocent, quote-unquote's death, the Pope continued to claim supremacy, but they were challenged by the monarch's growing power. In the late 1200s, France's Philip IV successfully challenged the Pope on the issue of taxing the clergy. Philip then went on to engineer the election of a French pope. Germany was different in its development of nation-states. It actually never really accomplished that. The German king, Otto I, was famous for his defeat of the Hungarian forces that had been advancing towards Western Europe. His defeat in 955 on the banks of the Lech River made the Magyars turn more towards the east rather than the west. And this made him a hero to all the Germans living in that territory. And as a result, he was elected to become king over those territories, and the other nobles and church officials became vassals of Otto I. And this created a swath of territory starting in Germany all the way down into northern Italy. With his ascension to the throne, he saw himself as kind of a later day Charlemagne. And so he even chose Charlemagne's capital as his capital in Germany, and the name was Aachen. Aachen, Aachen. This was Charlemagne's traditional seat of power. Otto I received his crown from the Pope, and this created the foundation for the position known as the Holy Roman Emperor. It was holy because it was given by the Pope. It was Roman because this position was seen, this was seen as an extension of the old Roman Empire, and so he was considered an emperor. But this set up the very beginnings of what became a very brutal and bitter war between the secular powers of the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope. He felt that it was his prerogative to choose bishops and archbishops within his territory. This lay investiture became an issue that the Pope wanted to fight about. The problem was that Otto I really needed to be able to control these positions because this is where he gained his educated administrators from the church, because they were the people who had the education for those positions. And he didn't want to give up the choosing of those positions to the Pope, because it would give the Pope too much power over his territories. So though Otto I was the Holy Roman Emperor, he and his later successors, other Holy Roman Emperors, often found that their vassals were very uncontrollable and often had their own minds about what they wanted to do. Pope Gregory VII was a pope that believed in reforming the Catholic Church. And one of the ways that he wanted to reform it was to get rid of lay investiture. And he set about making some forceful decrees to try to solve that problem. Number one, he exclaimed that anybody who, any cleric who accepted a lay investiture position would be excommunicated by the church. And any monarch who practiced lay investiture would also be excommunicated. So Pope Gregory VII was playing hardball, and he was soon going to run across a problem. Well, Otto I's successor was a man named Henry IV, and Henry IV inherited the title of Holy Roman Emperor, and Pope Gregory VII's decree put a crimp in his style. So did the king have ultimate jurisdiction over all of his subjects, or did the clergy? This was the big question in Henry IV's mind. Gregory accused Henry IV of lack of respect for the Pope, for the papacy, and when Henry IV appointed some of his own officials into the positions of bishop and archbishop, Gregory VII followed through with his threat and excommunicated Henry out of the church. This was actually a very dangerous position for Henry IV, because it now opened up Henry's vulnerability to being overthrown by some of his noblemen. The noblemen could legally, quote unquote, overthrow him with the consent and the support of the church. But Henry was a very smart man, and he was able to outwit Gregory. He knew Gregory's winter home was in the Alps, and so Henry crossed the Alps in around January of 1077, and he stood outside the Pope's residence in northern Italy in the Alps for, the legend has it, for 3 days in penitent supplication to try to get the Pope to change his mind and to re-communicate him after being excommunicated. As a priest, the Pope was obligated to grant absolution and to readmit Henry IV as emperor of his territories. Well, Henry scored a temporary victory because he did regain his kingship and the authority over his domains, but in the long run, it actually backfired against him. Well, Henry's move to outwit the Pope and get reinstated into the church actually was only a temporary victory. He did regain the kingship and the authority over his rebellious subjects. But in 1080, Pope Gregory VII again excommunicated Henry IV when Henry invaded Italy and captured Rome and was trying to control the city that Gregory was living in. And so Gregory escaped with his life, but lived in exile until 1085, when he sadly died, when the Pope died, and Henry's sons, encouraged by the successor, the Pope's successor, revolted against their father. And so Henry IV lost his dominions to one of his sons. This struggle between the Pope and the Emperor basically just preoccupied the monarchy and allowed an emerging noble dynasty to all the noble dynasties to just enhance their own power within Germany. So Germany never united the way other countries did. It didn't unite until the late 1800s. Finally, in about 50 years later, in 1122, there was a conference held in the city of Worms, and the issue was settled by a compromise. So bishops were going to be chosen according to canon law by the church, and but they could be in the presence of the emperor or his delegate. The emperor surrendered the right of lay investiture. Frederick Barbarossa, or Frederick the Redbeard, was a very ambitious Holy Roman Emperor. He envisioned a swath of territory right through the center of Europe, starting from the Baltic Sea up in the north down to the Italian peninsula. And so he set about trying to conquer all that territory for himself. He was not successful, but he did have a son who managed to gain Sicily through marriage. And through that marriage, Frederick II was born, and this was a special child with a very difficult childhood. His mother, Constance of Sicily, and his father, Henry, were both, his father was killed when Frederick II was very young, and his mother took him to raise him in Sicily, her home area, and they didn't get much money for his education or his upbringing, and so she lived a very simple life, and so he grew up without much pretension, but he was a very smart kid, and when he grew up, he became quite a force to reckon with. His ambition was to reunite the Holy Roman Empire, and this was a very concerning ambition for the Pope, which had territory right between Frederick II's territories above in Germany and in Sicily. So the Pope continuously tried to foil Frederick II's attempts to reunite the Holy Roman Empire. Frederick II, I don't remember what, but he did something naughty, and so part of his penance was that he had to go on pilgrimage, and he decided to go on crusade, and so he actually went all the way to Jerusalem and negotiated without any warfare a settlement where the pilgrims could visit without any problems, and he was a modern leader. If you look at his policies and the way that he interacted with other foreign nations, his programs were extremely far-sighted, but he was a man who lived in the wrong time period. None of his peers saw the value of his wise ideas, and so he was very misunderstood. He eventually failed in his attempt to reunite the Holy Roman Empire, and his initial negotiations with the Muslims was not taken kindly. The Christians did not take kindly to those negotiations and considered that to be a little bit heretical to negotiate with Muslims. So he kind of ended his failure, his career in failure. Well, this time period was marked by disunity. The Italian states, city-states, never unified, and in fact did not really unify until the 1880s or 70s or 80s, and that was about 600 years away. The German states also had the same problem. None of them could agree with one another on almost pretty much every issue, and we will see later in the 30 Years' War that religion played a very big part in the differences between these little counties, what we would consider counties, but they were individually ruled states, ruled by princes. So all of those individual states were overarched by a Holy Roman Emperor who only unified them in name. After Gregory VII's excommunication of Henry IV, the Pope's power just continued to grow, and this led to papal supremacy in Europe. In 1198, Pope Innocent III took office as Pope, and he proclaimed papal supremacy, which means that he had authority over rulers. That's what he claimed. And so that he had the opportunity to make or depose kings. And this was, of course, a great challenge to the secular king. One of the things that Innocent III is famous for is reorganizing the church's courts, creating a more bureaucratic and structured court system that created something called canon law, which helped to regulate the church's interactions with one another and with a secular society. The Pope also took on a crusade against internal heretics within Europe, and one group that he specifically wanted to eradicate were the Albigensians in southern France, who preached something very similar to early Christianity in that it was very simple structure of the church, and people lived in community with one another, and most of them were illiterate, but they did try to read the Bible together, and this was unacceptable to the Pope. So he spent a lot of time and energy trying to eradicate the Albigensians in southern France.